Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast. I'm Catherine Tindall with Dominion. We're a CPA firm with our focus on helping advisors get a better insight on their income tax planning and strategy and compliance for their firms. But on today's episode, I have with me Michael Connaughton. He is a co-founder of Lead Advisor. He's been in the industry for over a decade. He's actually a CFP. And he's held various leadership positions at Fortune 500 financial firms. He works with wealth management organizations to help them with their hiring, developing productive sales forces, and then just basically elevating their firm's market presence and just, so helping them solve the people problem, which is one of the biggest problems. So thanks for joining me today, Mike.
Catherine, thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, because that, perusing a P&L or two for wealth management firms, salaries are always the biggest. That's the biggest number, right? That's usually controlling the bus. And, I think when I talk to advisors, once you solve the initial client acquisition, questions when you're launching a firm, it then just turns into, it's just a people management game. So I had a coach tell me the other day, you can't think of yourself as like a wealth management firm. You have to think of yourself as an HR company, like once you get to a certain point. So I've been looking forward to this conversation because it's something that it's very top of mind for anyone running a practice of just, okay, this is, for a lot of people, they start off being really great technicians, really good at delivering advice to clients. But then it's like, you almost have to completely switch, switch what kind of business you're in because okay, now we have to onboard team members. How do we find them? Who do we need to find? What order? At what size? And there's just so many things that go into, scaling personnel correctly. So I've been looking forward to this one.
Likewise. Yeah, it's a really good point. I think one of the things, Catherine, that we're always talking to firms about too is obviously priority number one is gathering more clients and focused on, being focused on that. But I think secondly, the biggest need that we talk to firms about seems to be finding the right type of talent so they can create more capacity within the firm and continue to scale and grow in the way they envision. And to your point about managing the staff, that can be challenging while running a busy business and handling your client obligations and also trying to train, onboard, bring on new team members. There's a lot going on there. So it's a conundrum I think a lot of smaller advisor teams are working with. And then I think as you scale, we're even seeing these practice directors and chief operating officers being implemented into practices so they can run the staff and create efficiencies within the organization because the primary partners or lead advisors just don't have the time or scale or capacity to do so. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I'm seeing more and more of the old school model of you run your book of business as a partner, or you run your practice, you're leading all the technical advice. You're also managing the team yourself. You're also managing the firm yourself. It's like, okay, now you got four jobs going on. I'm seeing more people shift into the model of, okay, you've got people that are doing technical advising, but then you have people who are really just operators. Like they're not doing client facing work. They're just making sure the trains are running on time. And then you've got even another tier of just management level of like making sure that the culture is right, making sure we're hitting the KPIs, making sure that cohesively everything's working together and leading, things forward, and the financials are, succession planning and just all those bigger pieces are going on. Have you seen things shift, over your time in the industry? Like, have you been seeing a similar shift? Like I've been seeing this, but like, have you been seeing that change, and has that changed some of the firm's perspectives on, more particularly from the owner's perspective of how they go through the course of hiring, or, what roles do you go for first, and those sorts of things? Have you seen changes when it comes to that?
Yeah, I think we have. And I think it's somewhat dependent upon firm size, as you might imagine, right? Depending on how they want to approach. But I've seen a big tick in these service advisor roles. That's been something that we've seen really increase pretty significantly over the last few years, I would call it, where firms are looking for somebody that can be that operator, as you described, maybe even sit second chair in client meetings so they can start to build some rapport with clients, but also are the quarterback post meeting where they're working with either financial planning support or they're working with operations and client service to move the sales process along. And I think the vision there on those service advisor positions is eventually start to hand a segment of the book of business to these service advisors to create capacity for the partners in the firm so they can continue to move upstream and have more free time to do so. So I think that's a big part of it. I think on a larger level too, if we're working with a more established firm, these practice directors, these COO roles are certainly ones that are well coveted, because I think somebody that can run the day to day, so these advisors can either focus on their passion, which is really just dealing with clients and being client facing and networking and building deeper relationships, or out there doing business development is also a big push. So I think that has been a more adopted practice with practices that we're working with, whether it be larger practices that are looking for the practice directors and COOs, or smaller practices that are looking for a service advisor that they know will create immediate capacity, but will also start to shift some clients their way, which could also create a lot more free time as they progress down the road with more tenure and experience.
And I guess like because I'm sure I see kind of two different general buckets of advisor practices, where we get some where it's they're very steady Eddie. The advisor, they just want to be advising. Like, they don't want to be running a huge multi-million-dollar thing. Like, they just want the clients to have a good experience. They like being in that client-facing role. They just want things to be well done. And then I see, a different bucket is really more of the, we're going to get this to $1 billion AUM, and like we're really going to go for it. And I see those two different buckets. And I wonder, like, from your experience with helping firms who are trying to grow, that are maybe in one or two of those camps, what are some of the things that you commonly run into in terms of maybe like mindset issues or just tactical things that firm owners might have blinders about, that they don't realize when they're going into talent acquisition mode?
Yeah, there's a few things. So those advisors that are really trying to scale, whether it's organically or through M&A, I think what they might not think about is all the support that requires as you're attracting new talent into the doors, right? So I think that's something that we're having conversations with firms all the time, and they're having a lot of activity around having potential advisors tuck into their business model. But with that, likely is going to require a much higher level of support, whether that's on the operation, the client service side, whether that's to manage culture and KPIs and teams like you were explaining earlier. I think that's something that might be overlooked. There's some firms that are out there being proactive and are even talking to potential advisors that might join them, that there is a plan to acquire some more talent to help support those efforts so they can continue to grow their business if they're part of their firm. But I think that's something that might not always be thought about early on. I think the idea of gathering new assets and adding new team members is really attractive, and the revenue that can bring in, but not thinking about the org chart and the structure that requires to do it successfully is an important element there. And then I think, on these more lifestyle practices, as you were mentioning, what I find there is that, even as they're growing and building good relationships and are in front of clients, I think one of the things that always tends to bog them down is the client service and operations work. So finding some good team members there that can help support those efforts, whether it's just, standard operations needs or client service requests that come in, is going to be a big need for them. Even if they're, not wanting to grow at this tremendous rate, I think they still are going to grow organically if they're doing a good job with their clients and building deep relationships and getting some referrals or penetrating that next generation. The need for client service support is always there. So I think those are the things that I think, whether it's either side of the equation, the two different types of practice owners we talked about, there's always a level of support in there that they're going to need. It's just about the best approach and how they can integrate that in so they can continue to grow and build the way they want.
Yeah, because I think for a lot of them, and this is a great point, and I've come across this a number of times, is that I think they think, I can just incrementally add in structure as I go. But in reality, you hit these certain levels where all of the sudden it's like, oh, I'm just in now a completely new level of complexity. And I'm going to have to add in a bunch of infrastructure to support this in order for us to go to the next level. And usually what'll happen is, oh, okay, we actually need to decrease the profitability in the firm for a bit because we need to build infrastructure, like personnel infrastructure. And then once we've built, the new infrastructure and overhead for that, now we have the platform we can get the growth out of. But it's very rarely like, oh, we're just going to have this like clean upward trend. And it's more, we're going to hit a plateau. We got to get infrastructure. Then we're going to get to the next plateau and then more personnel infrastructure. And I think it can be really shocking for the firms to realize like, oh, actually, we're going to have to dip our profitability a bit because we really need to just build some excess capacity here before we can move through it. And it's not just as simple as, okay, let's add this much AUM, add one person, this much the AUM, add the next person. Like it can be a lot more tiered like that. Same thing with like the tech stack stuff. But I find too, especially with the lifestyle practices, that can be, because they're dealing with smaller capital structures usually too, like internally for their financing, that can be tricky because it's like, okay, well, now am I the owner going to take a pay cut in order to make my quality of life better? And, am I even going to really be able to make my quality of life better? I don't want to be managing people, like, the common objections that I hear from people in that spot. So in terms of things that you've been observing, it's been a crazy couple of months for firms with the markets and everything. But I think in general, as I'm seeing a lot of the technology and things get better for what's offered to firms, how have you been seeing like trends change in terms of like personnel and hiring and training and things like that in 2025? Just a slight interruption in this conversation. I wanted to bring to your attention two things that are important for you to know. So we're always at the mercy of social media algorithms. So if you can subscribe to the show, that would mean a lot to me. Even more to me if you can leave a rating and let me know what you think about it. But we have a new newsletter that's coming out. It's going to be very active in 2025. That is specifically around tax issues that I'm seeing advisors face in their own practices, changes in legislations, and the pieces that I think are critically important for you to stay ahead of as an advisor with the new administration. So nearby, wherever you're interacting with this, will be the link of how to sign up for our newsletter. Also nearby will be the link to my LinkedIn, which is the best way to get in touch with me, learn more about what we're doing for advisors in the tax strategy and compliance work that we do, and also to get access to the various tools and interviews and things that I do, specifically designed to help you improve your practice, improve your own tax situation, etc. So let's get back to the episode, and thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. So, interestingly, with all the volatility, we haven't seen a slowdown in firms being proactive to hire. We haven't felt that yet. And I think that's partially due to all the activity that's required to manage your book in these times too, right? I think there's probably more client outreach than ever to make sure you're maintaining client relationships. And that might emphasize the need for support. So in some ways, while you think there could be loss in revenue with market dips and things like that, it hasn't scared people. I think a lot of advisors that we work with are in growth mode. They're tenured, so they understand that volatility is part of the game, and being close to clients is the way to retain them, right? So I think that has reinforced the need to get good support so they can spend time having those important conversations with clients. As I was saying earlier, I think the biggest trends that we're seeing are these kind of hybrid support / relationship management roles. I feel like that's where a lot of firms are going, where somebody can have a hand in client service and the operational aspects of the business, but they're also very capable of handling a complex client question, maybe running a client review, being a point of contact, even a primary point of contact for a segment of clients. I think if somebody can do that on both sides and see a growth path forward, that's important. I think that's the one thing some firms that lose out on talent fail to really emphasize in the interview process, Catherine, where they're not doing a great job of saying, you're going to come in this pseudo operational role, but there's a career path for advancement for you to become a junior advisor, a teamed advisor, a lead advisor. And here's the path forward. Here's what it looks like. And here's some of the benchmarks that the firm is aiming to hit for you to get there. I think if firms do a good job of outlining that early on, or even better yet, give examples within the firm, if there are any, on how they've progressed and people have advanced their careers, that can make a real impact when you're talking to talent. I still feel like the war on talent is real. I think,
Mm.
Candidates still have a significant amount of options, right? And they're still
Yeah.
looking, and there's a lot of firms still hiring, and naturally you have, the larger wires and bigger broker dealers that are out there looking for talent. Then you have this independent channel where we play most of the time that has to have a little bit of a unique competitive advantage to get the right type of talent and show a growth path and outline how they're closer to clients and have a strong culture and all those things that are important to candidates. So I think that's what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And each firm's a little bit different. Not everybody has those concrete examples that they can highlight, but if they're thinking about it and getting the right team members involved in the interview process and are working with speed and being thorough and having some momentum, I think that's how they can find the right types of people that can be long-term players to the growth of their firm as they envision it, whatever that growth path looks like in their eyes.
Yeah, no, that's great, because I think for a lot of those kinds of roles, like some of the best, because I work with people where I'm dealing with their team internally. It's like some of the best some of the best COOs that I've come across, it's like they're homegrown, like they started off as just an admin, and over time they find their way into these roles, and they really know the business in and out because they've been through it all, and they had that path, and then they stayed. I think in terms of what you've been seeing, like what are some areas that you see firms drop the ball on, or mistakes that you see commonly made that people might find surprising, from your perspective, watching this process happen for firms?
Yeah, there's a few different ones. So I'll start at the interview process, right? I think when firms are talking to talent, where they can fall down sometimes is just not have a structured and well
Hmm.
laid out interview process.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, candidates that are considering their options are looking at various firms. It's just how it is, right? So they're
Hmm.
not going to talk to one firm, they're going to evaluate multiple options. And I think you could be the best firm in the world, but if you don't have a well structured process, you're not keeping momentum. There's lapses of weeks in between interviews. You're just going to lack that attraction power that candidates want to feel. They want
Yeah.
to feel wanted, right, throughout the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
And you could tout your accolades and you can tout your culture, but if it's not well structured from the beginning, you're going to lose out there. So I think that's one thing that we're seeing that firms can fall down on, is just not get the key team members involved in the interview process from the beginning, not have a structured process that moves fast, not try to build some camaraderie early on, not highlight how a career advancement could look within their firm. I think those are things that could certainly happen. And I think, where firms might be losing talent out the back door after they've hired somebody could be through a variety of factors. I mean, it could be just stagnation.
Hmm.
They illustrated a career path that would allow for advancement, and now a candidate's in that role for multiple years and hasn't seen it. I think a big part of that, something that we've talked about recently, is this delayed succession,
Mm.
where an advisor might talk about their plan to retire, but markets have
Yep.
been good. They've had a lot of flexibility and haven't
Hmm.
really that hasn't happened. So that advancement internally hasn't happened for some of the team members, and that can cause some frustration at times and allow people to kind of go out the back door. I think sometimes it's just lack of flexibility too, right? Candidates are demanding
Yeah.
more flexibility and autonomy today with a hybrid schedule. And some of these firms have reverted back to the 5-day in office, and that's the way it was. And we're getting back to that. And that's the way it has to be going forward. And that could be, a little bit discouraging to some of the current, employees that might have had a level of flexibility at one point, and now are kind of going back to this more rigid lifestyle within the firm. So I think that could be something that, is allowing candidates to at least see what's out there, see if there is more flexibility, because they've gotten used to a level of autonomy and flexibility that's helpful in their home lives and still allows them to be ultra productive. So those are
Hmm.
some of the things that we're seeing. I think, early on here, I think there can be a variety of other factors that are at play in any specific firm, but those are some of the main themes that we've been seeing.
Yeah, that's great. So for firms who are interested in learning more about the work that you do, and how you work with firms, what's a good way for them to get into your world? And then also, if you could just give us like the 30,000 foot view of who should be reaching out to to learn more about you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think if somebody wants to learn more about how we can integrate in, we have a few different levels of engagement depending on firm structure and how they're growing. But it's typically a growing firm that understands that they need to add talent to continue to grow and scale and build in the way they envision. And they recognize they're at capacity, themselves and their team members are stretched, and they need somebody like us to go out and find the talent that can align with their culture and has the skills and experience needed to make a quick impact in their business, right? Mm-hmm. So those are the firms I think are typically coming to us, and we have a few different structures there, depending if you have to hire multiple employees or just a one-off. But I think the way we do that is do a bit of a discovery, understand what these clients are looking for, understand the needed skills, understand the culture, understand the schedule, understand the tools and resources and expertise these candidates need to have coming in on day one to make that impact. Mm-hmm. And they can find us either through, our social, on LinkedIn. They can reach out to us, through email or give us a phone call. And really what we'll do is a discovery meeting and see if we can be a potential resource. We want to learn more about the firm, what's important to them, what the growth path looks like, where are the areas of needs. We can help with role descriptions. We can help with candidate selection. We can help create pathways throughout the firm from what we've seen. We can certainly share best practices of firms that look and feel like theirs. We can talk a little bit about compensation data that we've seen in these different roles and use real life examples and try to be really what we call a fractional partner in the recruiting side to make sure that they're finding the right talent that can make an impact for their firm long term.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think for a lot of these smaller firms, that's so needed, right? Because with the whole employee function and bringing people onto the team, it's like you have to see it like you're making a sale in a lot of ways. And so if you're not building the infrastructure to like land the plane well, and you don't have a full HR department, or you don't, it's getting somebody who's got the expertise to be able to give them, okay, this is roughly how we need to do this, and where things are going, and just having that kind of support is so helpful. So for those of you that are interested in learning more about what Michael and his team do, we're going to have their newsletter posted below that you should sign up for, and then also the website and his LinkedIn for you to reach out. But any closing thoughts before we sign off for today?
Yeah, thanks for having us, Catherine. Really appreciate it. I think one of the things you just said that I'll leave you with is just important as having this momentum in the interview process is really having a well thought out client onboarding plan. And I didn't mention that earlier, but that's a really big impact. I think that first impression that you make and having a plan that's well thought out so somebody can get up to speed with your firm, whether you're leveraging a firm like ours or not. But if you don't have this onboarding, and I said client, I mean candidate onboarding plan here, right? Where you're having a candidate come in and integrate in and really have something mapped out for the first 90 days, and thinking through that and being, very specific with how you want these folks to integrate in and who they're going to meet with and how they can closely work can really be impactful and can be a big retention tool. That early impact, I think, makes a big difference long-term as well. So what I would encourage firms hiring, whether they need to leverage a recruiting firm like ours or not, is not only think about keeping momentum in the interview process to win the right type of talent, but really think through how you want to integrate that person in to make sure they can have a lasting impact in your organization.
Yeah, no, that's really good feedback, because I've seen it happen a couple of times where, somebody comes into the firm and then, because they were interviewing for other roles, they've still got other offers that are going on at the same time, right when they start. And so if they get in there and realize, oh, this, I'm on day 4 and this is not what I was sold. They're still getting offers in from the other places that they interviewed at like 2 weeks ago, so yeah, you got to make sure you land the plane on that for sure. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And for those of you listening, this was another episode of the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast. And I'm Catherine Tindall.